Okay. So I am very pleased today to welcome Betty Rosbottom, who is a local food guru. Betty was born in Memphis, Tennessee. She went to college and majored in French and did a junior year abroad, and that opened her eyes to a new world in food. She fell in love with the food, but especially the pastry shops. So when she came back, she decided to look at what the career opportunities were in the food world and to and then I'm gonna just ask her to elaborate on some of that so that we can get her input, not my version. So, Betty, how did you go from your return from Paris to actually getting started in the cooking world?
Okay, that's a question that's dear to my heart, because on that year abroad, and it was a whole year, mostly today, students who go to study abroad do a semester. But in my day, you went for the whole year, which I think is better if you really want to absorb the culture. And on that particular trip, on that journey that year, I met my future husband. He was in the group that I was in. So when I came back, I still couldn't cook. I had a better appreciation for food, but I also had a new boyfriend who, after we graduated a year later, became my husband. And very fortuitously, I think, he gave me as a wedding present something that maybe a lot of women wouldn't want, but I was thrilled by it. He gave me Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking, Volume 1, which had been out a few years. I think he knew that I couldn't cook, because the summer before we got married, we were all in New Orleans taking courses, and I tried to make scrambled eggs, and I put the beaten eggs in the skillet over the heat and waited for them to scramble. I didn't know you were supposed to stir them around, and so they burnt. And he was very good about eating the burnt eggs, but I think it was a sign to him that I maybe could use some training or some help. So I didn't know when I got Julia Child's first volume that all recipes weren't 5 pages long. You know, I thought that was a normal thing. And the great thing for me as a young French major, and having spent time in the city that she loved so much, was that I had had a lot of the dishes that she put in that book. For the first 3 years, when my husband and I were married, he was in graduate school. We had a very limited budget. So I only made the dishes that call for chicken or for beef stew meat, things like that. When my husband got his first job and I was still working too, I graduated to lamb and duck and fillet of beef. But Julia, being what she is, what she was really my teacher on the page. And I was lucky enough, because as many of you know, Julia went to Smith and came back for reunions, and I was able to meet her when she was active and coming back. And I was able to say to her that she had given me my career. She'd given me the beginnings of it, but I didn't know it then. I was, when I was first married, I worked in the rare books and manuscripts library at the college where my husband was studying. And then I taught French to junior high school kids. And that was an eye opener. And another kind of omen of what was to come is that each teacher in this junior high school needed to have an extracurricular activity that he or she was in charge of. And I had the cookbook club, and we got together with the art department, and they made us a little cover, and we did a book. It was called Valley Road, and we could cooking a la Valley Rue. And, you know, we made a cookbook of all the teachers' favorite recipes and the students. And so even my teaching days were beneficial to me. But it was a long time later, after my first child and only child, first and only child was born, I spotted, we were living in Philadelphia at the time, and I spotted some, a cooking course. It was before, you know, cooking was so popular. And it was an adult education course way out in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And I lived down near the University of Pennsylvania. But I took that course, and the woman who taught it was outstanding. She was the wife of a professor, a friend of my husband's. And I didn't know how influential she was going to be to me, because we moved away from Philadelphia for my husband to take another job in Ohio. And for, I guess, my son was 4 or 5 at that point, and I wanted to go back to work. And I read a book called Studs Terkel's Working, which was described all different types of careers you could have. And I was looking at, maybe a lawyer, maybe an architect. And I happened to get a job in the art museum in Columbus, Ohio. And I love my job in the art museum. I used my French. I was in the research department in decorative arts. And I've narrowed down what I wanted to do to be either cooking or working in the art world. And my curator said to me without missing a beat, do the food. And I had advertised in the little local paper of the neighborhood I lived in that I was giving cooking classes. Check this, 6 classes, 3 dishes each time for $30. You wouldn't get that again. And I got 4 students the first time, and they told more people, and I had more and more to come. And a couple of years later, I opened my own cooking school, and it was called La Belle Pomme, or the Beautiful Apple. And from there, my food career was launched, and I've loved every day of it. I really have. My goal when I was reading Studs Terkel was to find a career that I would love, and I was fortunate enough to do that.
Fantastic. When you were growing up, Betty, were there people within your family or in your local community who you looked up to as good cooks?
Absolutely. The one I think of first was my mother's mother, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. Her name was Stella. And she had 8 children. My mother was one of 8. They all loved food. They talked about it all the time. And my grandmother had a cook, but the cook was more like her support. I mean, they were best friends. They cooked together. I mean, my image of her that comes to mind is they're cooking together over a big pot of boiling water, and they've got figs in their napkins, in their aprons that like this held up, and they're putting them all in, and they're making fig preserves. And my grandmother did the kinds of things that I was more interested in than my mother. My mother was keen on opening cans, and she was the first to admit that. She opened a lot of cans. But my grandmother made coconut cake with fresh coconut. I remember seeing her grate it. And she took oranges for Thanksgiving and scooped them out and put cranberry sauce in them. And my grandmother lived near New Orleans in the southern part of Mississippi. And so there was always shrimp gumbo or shrimp jambalaya. And she loved to set the table, and I loved to set the table. So my grandmother died when I was 16, but nobody got the fig preserve recipe. Everybody's tried to duplicate it, but she made banana bread, date nut loaf bread. She would come up on the train and come with a big box of food. And she was a wonderful person. Everybody loved her. She was very giving, but definitely cooking was in her DNA. And I think I might have been lucky enough to get a little of that.
Mm-hmm.
Terrific. Is there a chef, a famous chef or a not so famous chef that you particularly admire?
Jacques Pepin. And I'm fortunate enough to say that Jacques is a friend of mine, because in the early days of my cooking school, we would have several times a year teachers who traveled. And it was right when Jacques was beginning his career of giving up restaurant work and being on the road. And he came, and I was one of the assistants, but the class was full because his books were already on. And we just were mesmerized by the amount of information he had. And he's really just a lovely individual. He has been to the Valley before for some of the events that we give here. And he doesn't live too far away. He's in Connecticut. He is precision personified. And at one point he said to me, because we had him so many times to come and teach, he says, "You should have my mother." His mother, his family owned a restaurant. His mother was the chef in the restaurant. So we had Jacques Pepin to come, and she didn't speak English, but because I was that French major, it worked out. And she was fabulous. And the one thing I remember that she taught us was that she was making a chocolate cake, and I was helping scrape out the chocolate batter to go in the cake can. And I knew we were in the kind of not a time crunch, but we were on a schedule. So I didn't cake quite all of it. And she says, no, 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 she said. And she explained in French that if you own a restaurant and you're making this cake 10 times, all those little scrapings that you would have left in there, another serving. And you can't afford to give that up. And I remembered that about her. She was absolutely adorable. Jacques to this day is on Facebook. He's doing fabulous videos. If any of you do Facebook, they're free and they're like 3-minute videos, and you can learn something every single time. I watched so many in the beginning that they said I was an official fan club member, but I don't watch quite as many now, but every time I watch one, I learn something. So Jacques would be my choice.
All right. What kind of food do you consider to be comfort food? What are the things that you reach for?
In the tradition of French cooking, any kind of braised stew, it can have chicken and mushrooms in it, or it can be bœuf à la bourguignon, or it can be a veal stew like I'm going to teach in a few weeks. And I just keep varying it up. Sometimes I serve it over pasta. Sometimes I do it with new potatoes or mashed potatoes, sometimes over polenta. But that to me, it just gets better with time. It takes a little bit of effort initially, but you can make enough if you're empty nesters like my husband and I are for 2 to 3 meals. And soup would be another comfort food, and anything with pasta.
Looking back, what would you say is your least favorite dish to prepare that people ask you?
Oh, let's see, to prepare. Not because I don't love it, but because it's temperamental. It's a souffle. I've only taught a few at the baker's pen, mainly because our ovens are a little bit temperamental. And when you need a certain surge of heat to make the egg whites expand and rise. You have to really know that oven, I feel like, at least for me. And so that would be something that I love and people like, but I haven't taught as much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Aside from French food, do you have another favorite cuisine?
Oh, I love Italian food. And I have to say that being brought up in the South, I love a lot of traditional Southern things. I love fried chicken. The New York Times many years ago came out with a fried chicken recipe that Craig Claiborne published for Chicken Betty's fried chicken. It wasn't my chicken. It was a woman in Missouri somewhere, but it was the same technique that my family used. You fry the chicken and you put the lid on slightly askew to steam it, but it keeps the crispness and it makes it tender. So I love dishes like that were childhood favorites. But another cuisine from another country, it would have to be Italy. I love all the risottos from the north and the pastas and the polentas.
Fun. Well, there's a famous quote that's attributed to Julia Child that actually she would say never happened. Well, I saw you drop that chicken on the floor, which of course I never did, is what Julia says. All I did was flip a potato pancake onto the stove, and then I put it back into the pan, and I said, well, if you're all alone in the kitchen, nobody's to know. Have you ever had a disaster like that? And how did you recover and, regain your confidence?
Well, I quote that quote. I use that quote from Julia all the time. If something goes wrong in cooking class and I drop something or I'm being just kind of clumsy with what I'm doing, I said, well, remember, you're in the kitchen alone. Or if something doesn't work the first time, say that you were making crepes and one of them tore, the heat element wasn't right for the crepe to set right. I'll often say, hey, you're in the kitchen alone. Nobody knows, nobody's here unless you're giving a cooking class like I am. So it's okay. And what I try to do when something like that happens, especially in front of students, is I try to tell them how to make it work, how to correct it. For instance, if you taste a pot of soup and it seems too salty because you've been overzealous with the salt, you can peel a potato and put it in there and the potato will absorb a lot of that salt. It might not take it all out, but it'll help. So things like that, when I'm cooking and something goes awry, I just say, well, this could happen to you and here's what I'm going to do.
Fantastic.
One thing you can't recover, I have to tell people this, if you burn chocolate, there's no recovery plan.
Well, Betty, lots of us have kitchen drawers that are just chock full of gadgets, many of them that we don't even know how to use. They've been birthday gifts, they've been bread and butter gifts when people have come over. Looking at your kitchen, what are the 3 tools that you really can't do without?
Chef's knife, because it does so many jobs. It'll slice, it'll chop, it'll take a pit out of a plum. And definitely the microplane zester. It revolutionized cooking. I mean, I must say that for those of you who don't have one, it's an under $20 purchase. It will change your life if you're still cooking with citrus and need zest, because the people who invented it based it on what you would use to shave wood off of, and it scrapes just the color portion of the lemon, the lime, the grapefruit, the orange, so that you don't get the bitter white piss. So that's been very important to me. And probably other thing, I mean, I'm not talking about, cookware or machinery, but something that could go in my drawer would be a very good instant read battery driven thermometer. I use that, pull it out all the time.
Terrific. Any tricks, in your opinion, to getting your kids or grandkids hooked on cooking?
I tried to. I have 2 grandchildren who are now 17 and one just turned 20 and she's in college. The older girl never had an interest, but my young grandson loved to get up on a stool and we made pancakes together, and if they're not completely cooks themselves today, they're very food savvy. For instance, I'll give you an example. Last year, when we were still dealing more with the pandemic, my granddaughter, who goes to college in Pennsylvania, had a boyfriend who was at UMass. So she made a trip up here. And she said, Mimi, which is the name she calls me by, she says, I'd like to have a dinner party. And she wanted to have her boyfriend and 2 other good friends who were at UMass. And I said, fine. And she wanted to have input on the menu. And I said something like, well, what if we do enchiladas or tacos? She says, I want something a little bit more, she used the word sophisticated than that. So we ended up doing a curry butter chicken, and it had, saffron rice, and she was in on the whole planning. And so she doesn't cook, but she appreciates good food. And I would say that my son, who is certainly grown up, has grown children, adores food. He is the cook in their family. His wife does none of the cooking. She has a demanding job. He has more time. He plans all the meals. He's known amongst his friends for giving great parties. He loves to smoke. He reads a gazillion food sites. It's rewarding to see that. And this is the kid who, when he was in high school, I found out was going around to all his friends' houses and telling the parents that he was just so glad to get a sloppy Joe because all he got was testing recipes. And he had another BLT that had basil mayo on it, So, but he is a wonderful cook, and it really brings a smile to my face. And I think everybody in our small family group appreciates food. So food can be just the greatest joy. One of the quotes that I remember from somebody not famous, but I stayed with a French family the first 6 weeks of my junior year abroad in the town of Dijon in the east of France. And everybody was blessed with wonderful families. I thought mine was just the creme de la creme. And they were very down to earth. And we ate our main meal at lunch every day. And we had omelets and soup and salads for supper. And the French mother said to me, and I'm going to say it in French and then quote it in English because it's such a pretty phrase. La meilleure conversation est toujours à la table. The best conversation is always at the table. And I didn't know it because I was, a 20-year-old at the time, but all of those things, all the wonderful food she put on the table. And my mother was, opened a lot of cans, but she did make fresh turnip greens and collards and fried chicken and those dishes that we all love, those of us who grew up in the South. So I think my family's influence, and I hope my influence through my love of cooking, has been something that's been important in our lives. You have to do it 3 times a day, so it might as well be interesting,
What do you think about some of the newer trends in cooking?
The newer trends, you want me to define what I think is newer trends?
Well, sure. And where do you think they're going to go?
Well, one of the things I've noticed is that many of the trends are to discover a new cuisine from a country that we don't know about. I mean, when I was at kind of the height of my career and doing a lot of book publishing, French and Chinese and Italian and then Thai and then Vietnamese came in. Now you can go through the countries from South America, from Peru or from Venezuela. I mean, people are doing Central American cooking. You can get Indonesian cooking. You can get more remote parts of the United States, I think there is all the devices we have, the computers, the phones, you can find information very quickly. And I'm a big reader of the New York Times. I think they do such an excellent job on Wednesday. I just love the food section. And they are always featuring something new, if you read Pete Wells, who's the food critic, he reviews as many Indian and, Thai restaurants as he does just, maybe Italian restaurants. I mean, there's always a discovery. And I marvel at how he knows the names of these dishes, which are sometimes multi-syllabic and I can't pronounce, and defines what they are for you. So even just reading that column will teach you something.
Fantastic. Wednesday Times. When do you find yourself to be happiest in the kitchen? What are the times that just fill your heart?
Well, probably my experience would be different from those of you here today because I test recipes all the time. Okay, constantly. I have a blog. I have retests and tweaked the recipes for our classes. And so I'm constantly looking for results. And when something comes out and my assistant is there and we taste it and we look at it and we say, oh my God, we don't need to change anything. That's it for me. And I'll give you an example this week. So last week, as one of my emails came through and it said, butter boards are in. It was from the New York Times. Okay. And, we all know about charcuterie boards or cheese boards, and the boards, entertaining is very important. But this said butter board, and it was there was a recipe that a food, I think she was a food writer or she was a stylist. A food stylist. But anyway, she had taken an idea for a butter board, which first appeared in a book called 6 Seasons of Vegetables. It won a James Beard Award. It's a wonderful book. I actually stole it from my son because he had it. And I said, oh, I really want that. And he said, you can have it. And he's a farm to table chef in a restaurant who farms a lot of his food or has farmers who bring it to him, and he got great butter. So I took the butter and he softened it and then spread it on a board. Okay. And then he put fresh herbs and capers and flowers on it and served it with really terrific warm bread. And you just scooped it up and put it on the bread.
Ooh.
So the woman who put it on TikTok, which makes me think she's very young because I don't know anybody over 30 who does TikTok, maybe a few. Anyway, she put the butter on a board and drizzled it with honey and some lemon zest and fresh herbs, okay, and served it with bread. Well, I got that, I think, notice. I was still up at 11 o'clock at night and my mind was just beaming after that. And within 2 minutes of my reading it, my assistant, whom I've worked with for over 25 years, who lives in Ohio, sent me a link to it, and I didn't write her back because I thought I'll never get to bed. But the next morning we talked and talked and talked, and we put together a recipe that we thought would work. So on Tuesday, when the assistant who lives here came to work with me, we took a stick of butter, left it out for an hour while we were prepping for something else. And after it was out, we had decided we would put the honey in the butter. So we took the butter, put it in a bowl, smashed it up, put 4 teaspoons of honey in it. And we decided some heat would be good. My original friend who wrote, so I put in cayenne pepper and I spread it on a board.
Yeah.
And then I took whole almonds with their skins on. I specifically wanted the skins and I roasted them, which, you can buy them like that, but I did them myself. Chopped them up coarsely, put kosher salt with them and sprinkled them on top. And I have thyme in my herb garden and we did a tablespoon of chopped thyme. We put that on top and we drizzled balsamic glaze. You could do vinegar, but you can buy the glaze just in zigzags over it. And I served it with warm bread, like a baguette. And I also served it for people who are gluten-free with dried apricots that were soft. And the funny thing is my assistant and I both tasted it. And we said, oh my God, this is good. We don't have to do anything to it. Okay. And that is never said. That is like once every 3 months we get a recipe like that. And it just so happened I was having the windows washed in my house for the first time in maybe 4 years, didn't have it done during the pandemic. And the window washers were here and I saw them. They were inside cleaning. I said, you guys want to taste this? They said, yeah. And one of them said, I'm a vegetarian. I said, you can eat it. So he had 2 servings. They had more servings. And before they left, one of them came back and said, would you be upset if I had some more of that butter? And I said, no. So we thought that was a success. And I carried it forward because yesterday I went down to Mass Appeal and I go down about once a month and do a little cooking demo for them. I just love them. They're wonderful people there. And Patrick Berry, who was the host, was there. And we sometimes talk ahead to what I might do. And November is an important month. So I said, you know what's hot on TikTok right now? And I told him about the butterboard. I hadn't even gotten home. He'd written me a note saying, can we get a date in November for the butterboard? So in November, about a week before Thanksgiving, I'm going to do that butterboard. I'm going to get a better picture of it. But that was just so exciting. And I often say to my husband, it doesn't take Cartier jewels or anything fancy to make me happy. Just a good meal or a good dish, is what I need. But anyway, that was an example.
Fantastic. Well, I want to open this up to questions from.
Show you. Can you see that?
Oh, yes.
That's my bad picture, but that's the butterboard.
Oh,
easy, 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 And today, the other assistant wrote 5 different ideas she had that we could do with it. But anyway.
wow.
Okay.
I want to open this up to questions from, the people that are here, because I'm sure they have
Sure.
lots to add to the conversation. So some of you are on mute. If you want, we can either do raising hands, or I think there's a small enough number that if I switch this to the gallery view,
yeah,
I can see everybody. If your camera's off and you want to speak, just figure out a way to let us know.
Oh, and if they want, they can do share video. I mean, they can go down and they have to make sure that the red line's not through the mute so that we can hear them.
Right.
Or they can write me a note
There you go. We can use the chat.
on the chat.
Sandy, I think,
Yeah, my grandson asked me a question about food. I'll
Okay.
repeat it here. Like, if you could only eat one food, Grandpa, for the rest of your life, considering you'd also get enough vitamins, what would it be?
What'd you say?
Well, it was like a no-brainer for me. I just said bread. Just
Right.
bread and butter.
Good bread is fabulous, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah, but I was wondering if someone asked you that question, if there's, chocolate.
Anything with chocolate. I am an absolutely chocoholic, and I know it's not necessarily healthy, although they do think it's good for you. But I tell you, we have, I don't know how many of you live in the Amherst. Well, you're all in Amherst, right? Because I think our farmers market's wonderful. And we have two bakeries there. One is the Berkshire Bakery and one is the Bread Euphoria. And they both have specialties. And for bread in particular, I think the Berkshire Bakery is fabulous. They are doing what they call miches, which are quarter rounds of these big French loaves, and they're delicious. They're $7, but they'll last you a week. And then they do a peasant loaf that's great, and they do jalapeno ciabatta. I mean, I marvel at what I can get at that market. They also sell a little pastry called cannelé that's great, and chocolate bouchon. And Bread Euphoria makes outstanding ginger scones. I mean, my husband just cannot get enough of those. And chocolate squares that are great, that they're studded chocolate squares. But when you said bread and I said chocolate, it reminded me of the market, because at Berkshire, they have a chocolate studded loaf, and they'll sell you a slice that's like $2.50. It's pretty big. And I went crazy over it a few weeks ago when I bought it. It was so good. But people can't, I don't think you can live by bread alone, but I think bread is really an important part of my life. And it's sad because so many people are doing low carb and they're not getting bread. And I just love all kinds of breads. I think they're essential to a meal.
I would agree 100%.
Also at Atkins, I don't buy their big baguettes, but they have something called a mini baguette that they have in a basket in front of the bread section. Those are wonderful. They're 99 cents and they come separately wrapped pretty tightly, and you can freeze them. And you can just put those in the oven with your hot oven with water, put water on the floor of the oven for steam, and they'll crisp up and they're delicious. So I buy a lot of bread.
Fantastic.
Any other questions? Can I ask you questions? Is that all right? Okay, so who would like to tell me what you buy? What gets you excited when you go to the grocery store? What do you put in your cart that you really can't wait to get home and eat or use in a recipe?
Now, this is a little embarrassing maybe, but I love Progresso soups.
I think that's great.
I think they have such a great variety of soup. And, when I go and get those soups, I'm just thinking of coming home, especially on a nice cold day, and they're very low calorie. I don't know if it has to, I get the low sodium ones, but I really look forward to having, a can of Progresso soup and bread for lunch. And bread from Bread Euphoria.
Yeah, they have great breads too. They do.
Rotisserie chicken, I like.
The roast chicken?
Rotisserie chicken, yeah, roast chicken.
Oh, I buy that all the time, and we get at least 3 meals off of it.
Yeah.
Hilda.
All right.
Hilda, what were you wanted to say something?
I'll tell you what I wish I could buy, because I looked everywhere and I can't find it. Not only did I live in Paris for a couple of years, but UMass also had a program in Bologna where we spent several summers, and I got smitten by lasagna verde off and I want to make it. And the only way I can get green noodles is to make them myself. And I'm really past the stage of wanting to make them myself, because the lasagna verde itself is a whole day process of making all the parts to it. So where can I buy green noodles for lasagna?
I mean, I don't make lasagna a lot, but I think you might be able to get them at Whole Foods. Because they have, I've seen green noodles there. Whether or not they have the lasagna, I don't know. I'd advise you to call before you go. The other place you might be able to find them is this that store called Provisions in Northampton. You can, but
They got one in North Amherst too. Do they have things like that?
I don't know, but if you ask, they might get them in, because you can say there's nobody carrying them. Big Y, I have found to have lots of things I didn't expect to get. When they remodeled a few years ago, they kind of changed their philosophy. And I was going through all the pastas there, but I don't remember seeing specifically any green lasagna, but there's always the internet, if you just type in green lasagna noodles, if they have DeCecco, those are really good. Gargofalo, I never pronounced that right, are really good. Atkins carries very good pasta, but I don't remember seeing any.
They have the narrow noodles in green. I've got some on my shelf. I haven't cooked.
Yeah, but their pastas are good. I don't know who does their food buying, but for that area of the store, but it's good. That's interesting, because we all have something we want that's not there.
I dream about it because they're very thin noodles, unlike the lasagna that we get, the white ones. They're very thin.
What I like from Atkins is they sell DeCecco egg noodles, and you can get the fettuccine, and they come in nests, and one of those nests is enough for, a meal, and it's delicious. But, well, who else? Somebody else must have something they like to come home from the grocery store with.
Marion?
Yeah. I don't do as much cooking as I used to.
Yeah.
But I do tend to want to make something special when the holidays come. So it's been the Jewish New Year, and I also have a friend who just got COVID, and I wanted to make something nice for them.
Of course, yeah.
And drop it off on the driveway and speed away. So I made one of our family specialties, which is kasha varnishkas, which is buckwheat groats and bow tie noodles. But the way that I make it is to get tons of mushrooms and onions and really caramelize them, and then toss it in with the kasha and with the noodles and a little bit of broth, and it's just insanely good. And we've been eating it for like 3 days.
I know. The problem is when all your kids go and you don't have very many people at the table, when you make one of those big dishes, I find that I have to freeze them, or we're just going nutty.
You know what? Honestly, I actually didn't mind. It's just been so delicious. Yeah, it's been so good.
Yeah.
So I really do like, we're entering that time of year where it's fall and the winter dishes. And I'm kind of excited about bringing out my big, heavy braising pot.
Oh, yeah. Mine has been out, and one of the things I love, I know there's somebody else here who's been in Paris. And not only do I eat French food in Paris, I eat Moroccan food. And I love couscous. And a typical couscous in Paris will not be a real sophisticated thing. You'll get a big broth with all the carrots and the zucchini and the chickpeas and the turnips or rutabagas in it. And then you'll get grilled chicken or grilled merguez, which is the sausage. And I made that on Sunday, and I made it on Monday. And my husband said, we can have this again tomorrow night. It was so good. But let me tell you what my big discovery was. I was in Big Y with a friend, and they have a whole section from D'Artagnan, spelled D''A''.
I've gotten some of their stuff.
And it's a little bit more expensive, but it's very high quality. And they really make an effort to get good products. They had a little package of 5 merguez, not gigantic, more miniature, but delicious tasting. I think they're $9.99. I grabbed them. They freeze like a dream.
Yeah.
And you can pull them out for, I mean, I've made them, put them in soups and everything else, but they're really good for this couscous. So I came home with that and I couldn't wait to open it. I was so excited about it. So, but your dish sounds fabulous. The one
I
that
wonder
you-
if I could ask your advice about something, actually.
Sure, of course.
I lived in New Hampshire for a while, and this probably sounds crazy, but my favorite restaurant in the world is a hole in the wall.
Oh,
It's
it
a
does
Greek
sound crazy.
diner. And there are these old women in the back who are probably about 150, and they've been cooking their whole lives. And they make a dish which is lamb shoulder. It's called roast lamb garnish, and it's fall apart tender lamb, which comes with all kinds of other, side things.
Yeah.
But the lamb is incredible, and I've wanted to make roast lamb for decades, and I don't know how to. And I know I can get it at Whole Foods. I'm not a big garlic person. It's not a highly seasoned dish.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice?
Well, if it's that fall off the bone tender, it's probably braised. That is, it's roasted in liquid. And the French have a dish called l'agneau à 7 heures, lamb and 7-hour lamb.
Mhm.
And you could look up, in Greek cooking. I mean, now you can go online and say, I want a slow roasted lamb. And
Mhm.
probably they would say if it's a leg of lamb.
No,
keep
it's shoulder.
shoulder. Okay. Those might be boneless or they might be bone in.
Mhm.
Bone conducts the heat, so it helps it to cook faster, but you could do either one. And I think that Whole Foods carries pretty good lamb like that. You can get it from them. And I would say that you would brown it off in olive oil. You don't want garlic. I mean, I kind of like garlic, but you could put oregano and some of those Greek herbs, on it. You could put some lemon zest in with it and then cook it in chicken or beef stock. And I don't know if it has wine in it or not. It might just be cooked in water if it's done by, women who are cooking forever and cooking for a diner. They're going to be a little bit more frugal with what they put in, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be good. And I think that it's slow cooked and it's covered. And then maybe the lid is taken off so it can brown up. And then those juices are golden, they're just fabulous. I have favorite places I love to go to, and I would call them hole in the walls too.
Mhm.
And on the Cape, which we love to go to on the kind of the elbow of the Cape, north in Orleans. Well, I don't think it's open anymore, but it was a fabulous kind of hole in the wall with fish place. And when you went in, they had the little stools like you would get in an ice cream parlor, and plastic tablecloths on. But they made the best lobster rolls. They made fried scallop rolls. Every time we went, I couldn't wait. And this year we were there near it, and it wasn't there anymore. I don't know.
Oh, no.
It's really sad when those places go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Anybody else cooking something you're worried about? Okay, so what are you having for dinner tonight? Who knows? I'm not sure yet. You having fast food? I'm having fast food tonight.
What do you eat in the fast food category?
Lamb chops, loin lamb chops. They're a pretty good deal at Whole Foods. And I put herb de Provence, salt and pepper on them, drizzle them with olive oil and put them under the broiler for 5.
Oh my God, you call that fast food?
Yeah.
Right.
Last week I had pulled pork barbecue from Atkins that they did, and I put my Southern barbecue sauce that I buy from Memphis on it, and I bought their coleslaw, and I had good buns, and that was our fast food. But tonight, because I knew I'd be busy, I'm going to have the lamb chops and a salad and maybe some pasta, and that's going to be it. But I'm curious because all of you represent a cooking segment of our town, of our state, of our country. And so I get some of the best ideas I get from my students, and it's always interesting to hear what others are making. So Sue, we haven't heard from you. What are you making tonight?
I actually am not cooking tonight.
You're not.
I have a meeting in Northampton at 6 o'clock, so I'm gonna figure something out when I get home, but you know, depending how tired I am, it might be scrambled
Cereal.
eggs with some fresh herbs. It could be,
Yeah.
It's funny. I had a friend who was a chef, and I invited her to come for dinner, and I, I was so worried about what I was going to feed her. And she said, anything that I didn't have to think about, shop for, prepare, or do the dishes is a wonderful meal. You could give me a bowl of Cheerios that you bought and poured into the bowl, and I'd be thrilled. So
I feel the same way. People sometimes say because I teach cooking, that, they're afraid to have me over. And I said, you can order pizza. I don't care. I just like the company and the fact that I didn't have to do it. So everybody loves to be treated to food, or just to the thoughtful gesture of food, I think.
I am making some blue cheese and fig savories to take to this meeting,
Ooh,
because we're
fresh
meeting
figs.
outside. No, it's a shortbread dough that is just flour, butter, and blue cheese
Ooh,
that you throw into the food processor until it just starts to stick together. And then I shape it into a log and put it in the refrigerator for half an hour, or I make a double batch and put some in the freezer. And I pulled one out of the freezer this morning, and you just do it like a slice and bake cookie. You just
Yeah.
slice it, put a little indentation with your knuckle, and put a little bit of fig preserve in there.
ooh, that sounds
Bake them for
wonderful.
12 minutes, and they're just this combination of sweet and savory that it just pops.
That sounds fabulous.
It's
That really sounds good. That made me hungry. Well, I love seeing all of you. I think this is such a great thing that you're doing with Amherst Neighbors, and I'm pleased that so many people would join it. Question?
Linda, did you have a question?
I thought I heard somebody. Well,
Yeah,
Oh, I do have one quick question here.
sure.
I don't know if you were gonna go out, if I was not eating it, I am eating at home. And we're
Yeah.
having some leftovers. My wife cooked it's chicken thighs. But if I was going out, do you have any special places you like to go to in Amherst in the valley for dinner?
Well, more in the valley. I think one of the real good cooks in the valley used to be the chef at Chez Albert, and he's opened a small place called Wax. It's not too hard to get to. It's up in Hatfield.
Oh,
You can eat outdoors. It's kind of tight if you eat indoors. His food is delicious. He makes a bolognese sauce. I mean, he's not Italian. I mean, he does foods from around the world. He does great fish. And, it's not what I would call an inexpensive meal, but it's certainly reasonable for the quality of the food that you're getting. And Food 101 is still open, and that's great food. I think India House in Northampton had a great outdoor seating area there. I haven't been inside, but they've redone it. For lunch, I like Essalon. I think they make great sandwiches and, a lovely outdoors to sit in, and I meet people there. Way up in Shelburne Falls is the Gypsy Apple. I think that is Michelangelo's. I forget his last name, but he has a new wine witch in Northampton. But I think that Gypsy Apple, it's too far for me to go to on a regular basis, but it's delicious. And I've always loved, if you're willing to go to Sunderland, the Blue Heron. It's just, it's consistently good for me, and nice service. I don't know. I'd like to hear your favorite spots. Where do you guys go?
well, I just heard that the Wine Witch has closed.
Permanently?
I think
Yes.
so.
yeah,
Yeah,
it has.
Why? Oh, I mean, I heard it was just packed. I'm not,
I know, he had a statement in the Gazette saying that he was closing.
wow. I didn't know that. I didn't go because I didn't want to be inside in a crowded room. I was nervous about that, but I heard good things, you know.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting
Yeah.
for the COVID numbers to get better before I would go, but
I tell you a place that when, I think you can eat outdoors now, but when we meet friends in Northampton a lot, we go to Roberto's Pizza. That's really good. They make crispy, smaller pizzas, and they make a chopped salad that's great, and they make great macaroni and cheese, you know. And it's on, what do I want to say? It's not State Street. It's the street, the big intersection. It's the extension of King Street, whatever that is.
it's
That's really good.
South Pleasant. I think that's.
That's it. Maybe that's it. And that wonderful Jake's for brunch is great.
Mhm.
Yeah, we lost the Jakes in Amherst. They've closed.
Where was it?
It in
North
North Amherst, by the mill building.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the trolley stop. I think they
One
called
of
it.
the saddest things, besides all the individual, you know, loss that people have suffered, is that many of the places that I really like seem to be closed, you know. I mean, even Hastings, I mean, they don't do food, but I loved Hastings.
Yeah.
I hate to see that gone. But you know, I guess it's just part of life. You have to be flexible. Have
Well-
any of you seen Stanley Tucci's
Searching for
Discover-
Italy.
it's not Discovering Italy, it's something Italy.
In
I
Italy-
saw the
In
first
Search of Italy, I think.
huh?
I think it's called In Search of Italy, something like that.
Searching for Italy, or yeah, I think that's it. That's wonderful. And also we mentioned Julia, we mentioned Julia Child. I did. There are many things about Julia, but there's a whole series called Julia. And it's it's based on her life, but some of it's a little bit extra. And it's about her time when she started on TV at WGBH. And it is a hoot. It's an upper.
And that actress has her down pat.
Who said that? Who said that? Who is
Hilda.
saying that? That
Hilda
is
Swan. That
I-
actress, she's unbelievable. She even looks like her.
exactly. She has the same build as Julia. I agree. It's wonderful.
She's,
I don't
she-
know.
One
Um,
other great place to eat locally that I like a lot is Alina's on Route 9 in Hadley
A
across.
lot of my friends go there. And the service is very nice there.
And they
Well,
have
look-
outdoor eating for,
They have a big tent.
yeah. I don't know if they're gonna, I don't think they're gonna be heating it, but I don't know, maybe.
The
Yeah.
problem with Amherst is the economy is basically a few months in the spring and a few months in the fall, and good restaurants can't make it on that.
No,
That's
no,
what happened to Shale Bear. They couldn't make it on the few months.
no.
Oh.
Chez Albert first opened down on the main street of town, not the main street, but Pleasant Street, you know.
Pleasant Street, yeah.
By
that-
Hastings, the
I really
Hastings
loved
block.
it. But yeah, no, it's very hard. No matter where you are as a restaurateur, as a chef, it's a long day. It's a really long day. And I've read lots of books. There's a book called Dirt by a man named Bill Buford that's wonderful. And it takes place in Lyon. And he's a food writer and a journalist before that. And he took his family to Lyon to stay for 6 months, and they stayed for like 6 years or something. And he talks about, you know, in Lyon, a lot of women have restaurants. He talked about the women of Lyon and where he worked and all the different restaurants. And Anthony Bourdain, who's been so much in the news, that Kitchen Confidential was quite a book. I reread it because my book club decided to reread it. And, you know, it's just a hard life. You know, you work a long time. If you don't like it, if you don't love food, you can't do it. You can't exist in it because it's demanding of not only you, but those who are close to you. And
We don't have enough full-time residents in this town or in this valley to really support commerce in our downtown. And
Yeah.
that's why we have so many Chinese restaurants and not much else anymore.
Yeah.
Unlike it used to be way back when I first came here. Well, I was a college student here in the 50s, and this was a different time.
Yeah.
You could buy anything you needed. If my mother-in-law needed a birthday present, I could go to Aunt August and find something that would fit her, you know?
I
She
know,
was-
I know. That is a hard thing to accept. But I think, I mean, Food 101 has great food. This Waxwing, if it's not too far for you to go. And in the warmer months when it's lighter longer, it's easier to go there than right now when it's getting darker earlier. And India House and Bombay Royale in Northampton are both good. It's not a lot. It's not like living in New York or being in Paris where you have your choice of many cuisines, but for a small town, it's enough to at least get us by for right now. And they have tried to do good things, I think, during the pandemic. I think
But
most
if you live in Paris, you can go into any little restaurant on the corner and get a fabulous meal.
Well,
I mean, at least that was my experience 50, 60 years ago. Things may have changed.
That was true a long time ago, but you can get a bad meal in Paris. And
You
I'm
get a
saying
bad meal now, okay,
as
I'm
a
just
person
going-
who adores Paris, and I'm going next week for the first time in 3 years. So I'm really excited. But I had several reports back from friends who went for short visits, that is a week to 2 weeks this summer. And they were saying to me the food wasn't good every place because there's a shortage of labor
I'm
there.
sure.
So
We-
I went on a website called Paris by Mouth. It's a great food website, and you have to pay if you want to get the real good information. And they did something extraordinary. They listed 40 restaurants in September that they thought were good and would be good dining options in the fall. And they listed 10 more that they thought they had their eye on. And that gave me enough self-confidence to think, okay, some of my favorites weren't on that list, but I read the reviews, and saw how recent the reviews were. And I'm just so excited about, having somebody else cook for me and have it be creative and interesting. But I think in France, just though the quality of so much about food is high. We're staying in an area we stayed in before, and they're great street food markets. We could make a meal on going to the Italian deli and buying cold cuts and buying fresh fruit and buying a pastry. It could be supper.
I'll tell you what we used to do. We both had to work when we were in Paris on various postdocs, etc. We would escape every weekend to the provinces, and then all our subsequent trips after that was either to Alsace-Lorraine or to the Dordogne, and eat like the real natives ate.
Oh, that's just fabulous to get to do that. One of our friends one time who'd spent a lot of time in France said that she and her husband wanted more than anything to take a trip around the periphery of France because it's a hexagon.
Yes.
And they
Yep.
thought they could eat their way around it and it would be great. And some of our French friends have been generous to invite us to go to different areas of France that we haven't been to before. And we go for little short trips, like 2 days. We went to Alsace for 3 days a few years ago. And I had my first in Alsace Alsatian tart, that flamand, the one that they do at the Trader Joe's, but not quite as fancy as the ones we had. And I just love that food. And I love the food of Burgundy. I've spent a lot of time in Provence, and I teach classes based on the Provençal food. And I used to teach, I took a groups of Americans to the Dordogne. I did that for 6 years. And it was-
Well, that's a lot of foie gras.
oh, I know. We even got to see the ducks being fed the foie gras, but the foie gras was great. It was.
Not my favorite.
Go ahead.
I top liver, but I don't like foie gras.
Oh, I'm not big on, fried liver, but
No,
foie gras-
chopped liver with lots of onions.
yeah. My mother
Jewish
used to make
My
liver,
mother.
but no,
There you go, yeah.
France is great. France has many good things. You have a question over here, I can see.
Now, I was going to say that there is a series of books about a detective that is set in the Dordogne.
Oh,
It's,
yes, I've read those and I can't remember.
Bruno, chief of police.
Yeah,
Bruno,
I've
chief of
read
police.
those. Yeah,
And
they're
you know,
darling.
he's a wonderful cook. And, you know, and
Yeah.
it just makes my mouth water just to read those books.
I know, he's great. I read them too. I don't think they're a whole lot, but they're really good. I really. Do any of you remember Peter Mayle when he wrote A Year in Provence? He
Yep.
is a British writer, very funny. I read those books and I would just burst out laughing in the middle of them. They were so funny. So France has been a place that people write about the food, the wine, you know, all different aspects of French life. But when it comes to food, boy, you can be in a cab. This has happened to my husband and me. And we would be going to what we considered a splurge restaurant, you know, a 2-star maybe, and very rarely a 3-star. And we would give the address to the cab driver. And before you got there, they were telling you all the things they knew about that restaurant. I mean, they might not have been there, but they knew about it, you know. And I thought any country whose populace, you know, is that involved in food is good for me to visit. So
You haven't even talked about the thousands of cheeses.
the thousands of what?
The kinds of cheese.
Oh, the cheese. Oh, the cheeses are, yeah, they're.
I would stand in this long line on a Saturday morning at the fromage, and the woman would always stop the one line and stick her sticker and I had to taste every one, and she had to teach me French at the same time. You know, there's such memories that are associated. And the same thing when we would get for the dog, we would go to the store to get all the scraps from the liver and the hearts and all that they would save for my German Shepherd.
Well, I have
Teach me French at the same time.
I have a lot of cookbooks in my house, and 3 that I adore are small little volumes, and they were given to me by an older French friend. They were what we'd call community cookbooks, and I look at those books all the time. They're written the way the French write. The French do not write recipes with holding your hand every step of the way. I mean, in America, we make an effort to make sure that our directions are very detailed and inclusive. In France, they don't even put the list of ingredients in the right order, even in published cookbooks. But these little community cookbooks will say things like, oh, so make a crème anglaise or buy one, because you can buy crème anglaise there, which is the English custard sauce, you know, and you're supposed to know how to do that. And I once asked a French friend, why did they do that? She said, oh, it's a game. You know, you're supposed to be able to figure it out. But those little cookbooks have been so inspirational to me. I've gotten lots of ideas out of them. I'm going to get to see the woman who gave them to me next week. And I don't think they have a 4th edition, but if they do, I'm going to see if I can get it. It was a fundraiser for a school, a parochial school. And they're just great books. So it goes hand in hand with the hole in the wall diners and all these things that we love.
My mother sent me, when I went for my postdoc, she sent me along with, because we had to go by vote in those days, so you could take a whole trunk full. Julia Child's book had just come out. And the good thing about that is that I could buy all the things that were in it that were not available in America.
Exactly. Yeah.
Go to the market on Saturday and there'd be a whole display of the stuff like salsify and what other thing. Celery I never had before. I went and got it in Paris, but Julia told me how to cook it.
That's right.
How to make it into remoulade.
I love celery remoulade. That's celery root that you take tough outer skin off and you cut in julienne slices and you make the French version of remoulade sauce, and it's sold in lots of delis. It's sold in grocery stores.
Mayonnaise and sour cream together.
It's really good. Very good.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Any other questions? Anybody have a question?
Well, Betty, I want to thank you so much for spending the late afternoon with us.
Oh, I look forward to it all day.
Well, me too.
Fun to be with
We-
all
I'm
of
sorry I missed the beginning. Oh, you have a recording. I can catch the beginning. I had another Zoom class before this one.
Well, thank you all for coming on behalf of Amherst Neighbors. Thank you, Betty Rosbottom.
my
and-
project.
I will let you know that, when Betty's teaching a class at the Baker's Pin, if you're on their email listserv and you get a notification, you better act fast because they sell out. The in-person ones sell out really quickly. Thank goodness for the Zoom. but-
Oh, well, and,
because-
and the Zoom is comforting to those who aren't ready to be indoors. And now, we feel just the way you do about our classes. We feel that this community, the Amherst, the Northampton, the surrounding towns have supported the Baker's Pen Cooking School. And we are so appreciative to everybody because we wouldn't be there without your help. So I hope to see some of you. I'm doing Paris cooking on October the 26th, and it's up on their website, but I'll be sending pictures to Lisa for her to put up, and it'll be fun.
Fantastic. Well, safe travels to you, Betty.
Thank you. Keeping my fingers crossed. We've
Yeah,
been
th-
vaccinated and boosted. We're looking forward to going. Okay.
All right.
Thank you all. I hope you have a good
Thanks so
night.
much.
Have pleasant eating.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.